joining us. We're going to have an introduction and walkthrough of H536, which is an act related to toxic heavy metal in baby food products. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I am Representative Mary Catherine Stone of Burlington, Vermont, and thanks for the opportunity to come in here and speak about H536. I want to share, to start by sharing why this bill is deeply personal to me and then why I felt compelled to introduce it here in Vermont. I first heard about this issue from my friend and colleague, Delegate Michelle Maldonado of Virginia. She was speaking about a rare bipartisan win in her state in a time of increasing polarization. And that alone caught my attention. What could have made it out of the Virginia House with no opposition? When I learned it was legislation addressing toxic heavy metals in baby food, I started digging deeper, and what I found was alarming. Around that same time, I was pregnant and thinking carefully about every choice affecting my child's health. I was shocked to learn that even in this year, 2026, toxic heavy metals and things that we have heard of like lead, arsenic, cadmium, and mercury can still be found in foods marketed for babies and toddlers. As parents, we assume baby food is among the most highly scrutinized products on the market. But the reality is that testing and disclosure are not consistently required, and parents often have no way of knowing what is in the products they buy. My concern is not only personal, it's also professional. I am a licensed and registered occupational therapist with significant experience and additional certifications working with children. I have worked in pediatric settings, including a neonatal intensive care unit, where I helped infants develop feeding skills. I have spent years supporting child development and partnering with families on nutrition and growth. And yet, despite that background, I did not know this was an issue until I started researching it myself. That realization was powerful. If someone with my training and experience was unaware, how could we expect the average Vermonter to know? That told me immediately that transparency itself is a form of consumer protection, and it's not theoretical. In Maryland, Rudy's Law was inspired by a child who suffered lead poisoning linked to contaminated food pouches. That story underscores that this issue has real-world consequences for real families. These exposures, even at low levels, can affect neurological development, learning, and lifelong health outcomes. We're not alone. Other states are recognizing this. California, Maryland, Virginia, and Illinois have all passed similar laws requiring testing and transparency for baby foods. These efforts have been bipartisan and grounded in public health, not politics. They show that this is a workable policy and that states do not have to wait for federal action to protect their residents. What H536 does is straightforward. It sets expectations for testing, disclosure, and transparency so parents can make informed decisions. It aligns with federal guidance while closing gaps that currently leave families in the dark. It does not ban foods or vilify manufacturers. It simply says that when products are made for our youngest and most vulnerable, we should meet a higher standard of openness and accountability. I've already heard from legislators in other states, as well as our own, advocates, medical professionals, environmental groups, and families who are ready to testify. The Vermont Medical Society and others are interested in this conversation because they see the public health value. This breadth of support reinforces what I believe strongly. This is not a party issue, and it's not even a political issue. It is a public health issue. At the end of the day, parents shouldn't have to be chemists or policy experts to feel confident feeding their babies. The very least we can do is ensure they have access to clear information that we are minimizing avoidable risk wherever possible. Our children cannot advocate for themselves, so it's our responsibility to do that. If food resiliency means anything, it must include protecting the smallest Vermonters who depend entirely on the safety of our food supply. That's why I brought this bill forward, and that's why I respectfully ask your support.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or Representative Stone. You mentioned that it was Virginia first that you were aware of, and has the bill already, is this legislation now passed and enacted in law in
Started in twenty
Virginia?
twenty-six this year. Yeah.
And how about the other states that you mentioned?
Where was it? Maryland has it. It's Rudy's Law. That's the one that was brought forth because of a very tragic situation. I think that went through last year, 2024, 2025, and then California also has enacted it. And Illinois. They're all, yeah, on board.
So some big states.
Some big states and all over the, red, blue states, doesn't matter.
Representative O'Brien?
Because can you explain why these toxic heavy metals are in these foods? Because you think, companies would have nutritionists, and would they, actually feed these same baby foods to their own babies?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. I think just because there have been gaps and loopholes that have existed for so long that it's just kind of flown under the radar until kids start getting sick or die. And then we start asking questions and the curtain is being pulled back, and that's when all these states are coming forward. So, yeah.
Is it in the processing? Does it make the food taste better? I mean, I'm just wondering why, is it just happening along the way in sort of industrial food manufacturing?
I mean, I don't know. That'd be a good question for the manufacturer, and that's part of this bill is just to be transparent about what is in their food. Because we don't know. Yeah.
And Representative Nelson?
Where we need to look is where is food coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it being manufactured? Was it manufactured in Flint, Michigan? With bad water pipes? Was the water contaminated in making this? Is it coming from farms where they've applied sludge on the land? A squash grown anywhere shouldn't have heavy metals in it unless there's heavy metals in the soil. My son wouldn't eat squash. He loves squash now at 28, but he wouldn't eat it as a baby. But but it is so important, and that they get this right, because thank you for bringing it to our awareness.
Yeah. Thanks for,
Was it even true in some organic foods? I mean, that'd be the interesting thing.
again, I mean, that's why this bill is like pushing for that testing to happen so that we know where the issues are and then, can start pinpointing why and where in the process it's happening. But it's something, that's the whole point of this bill. It's like figuring out, are they doing the testing and what are the levels? So. But yeah, it could be through environmental contamination of soil, water, just like you said, as to why it's happening. Yeah.
Greg, did you have a hand up?
Somebody else.
Yeah, okay.
Someone's holding my hand down. I'm just wondering, you mentioned the Maryland law that was passed, and I think you mentioned it was related to packaging. Is theirs as broad as this, or do you know? Or
I would defer to legislative counsel, but it was linked to lead that was in a packaged pouch, but it didn't specifically say that it was like from the package. It could have just been, it was in the food and then in a pouch.
It wasn't just a packaging bill that they passed.
It was very similar to this, and this language was directly taken from Delegate Maldonado from Virginia. He's the person I heard about.
We'll bring up Ledge Council in a minute to look at the actual bill language, but Representative Bosson.
I was just gonna ask, it sounds like in terms of trying to find out where the problem is, testing is the key. Who's doing the testing in this case? I mean,
The manufacturer. So it doesn't, and Ledge Council can go through the details of the bill, but it wouldn't fall on like the store owner to do it or.
and it's not the Department of Health or something like
No,
that. It's individual.
Yeah, and then they would, like, if, it goes through like it did in Virginia, they have QR codes that they put on their products. So then when it's delivered to the, general store in Island Pond. It's already on there, like we don't have to do anything. And then the Attorney General and the Department of Health would be working together to make sure that that's happening. And if it's not, then they're the ones who would go after the manufacturer. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for joining us. If you need to get back to your committee,
Okay, I can-
please feel free to stay if you can.
Yeah, I'll stay.
Mr. Chairman, Mary Catherine, first of all, your presentation was really elegant, serious. Before the New York State Thruway was built, you're going west toward Wisconsin, you'd ride on US 20. And if you go by Canajoharie, beech nut baby foods with several, you ever see those? For years, I'm going back well over half a century. I don't know if they're still there.
They're not. It's quite a sight, yeah. Empty brownfield.
Stressed.
Yeah.
But the FDA, I can't believe that they don't, maybe they've been defunded, but you know, it's just remarkable that these type of toxic metals.
Yeah, I said it felt like I remember reading Upton Sinclair's The Jungle when I was in high school,
One of the best
you know,
books ever.
talking about rope ends and stuff being found in the food, and that kind of pulled back the curtain on what Americans were eating. And I feel like this is a similar situation. You know, when I was reading this bill and listening to my friend talk about it, I felt the same way. Like I was listening to that Upton Sinclair novel. It's 2026 and our kids are eating arsenic and some kids are dying because of eating lead. You know, anyway, this bill is really important and I appreciate you taking the time to listen.
We concur with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Let's have Katie come on up and this is not a long bill. It is not a short form bill. It is a long form bill, but it's not a long bill. So we won't have to absorb too much here.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Katie McFarland. Thank you, Office of Legislative Counsel. Let me share my screen.
We were to move on this, Chair. Does this go down to Senate Ag or does it go to a different group in the Senate? Because they don't have food resiliency tacked on there.
Yeah, the reason that we have the bill is that it was originally assigned across the hall. So it's a health related bill and they didn't have the time because of all the other things on their agenda and they asked if we had time and I said we might, so let's take a look. When it got to the Senate, they would probably go to the Health and Welfare Committee.
Yeah.
Right. So as you've heard, this language was pulled from a couple different states. I pulled language from Virginia and I pulled language from California as I was putting this together. This does a few different things. This requires that a manufacturer test the final product before it is distributed, and that those test results be accessible to consumers via a QR code on the back of the product or wherever on the product. And so that the consumer could scan that and have a sense of what the test results were. There's also language that says if a certain substance exceeds toxicity levels established by the FDA, that they cannot be sold. If a consumer were to find that a product does exceed those levels when they're using their QR code, there is language that this would be enforced by the AG's office, and it's sort of standard language that we use throughout the VSA. So that gives you a sense of where we are. This language would be located in Title 18, our health title, under the labeling of food, drugs, cosmetics, and hazardous substances. I'm creating a new subchapter, and in that subchapter, we'd have this new section for baby food products. I usually don't spend a lot of time on definitions, but I think here it might be useful to spend a little bit of time. So a baby food product means food manufactured, packaged, and labeled in a jar, pouch, tub, or box sold specifically for babies and children younger than 2 years of age, but it does not include infant formula. We have the commissioner, meaning the commissioner of health. The final baby food product means the finished baby food product, not the constituent ingredients. That language is used when we're referring to testing, that it's the final baby food product that's being tested. And because we just had a carve out for infant formula, what does that mean? That means a commercially available milk-based or soy-based powder, concentrated liquid or ready-to-feed substitute for human breast milk that is intended for human consumption.
Can we get a question?
Thank you. Why would we carve out infant formula? We've had some problems with infant formula, especially stuff that maybe comes from a country that produces paraquat but doesn't allow it to be used. Just saying. Why would we carve out infant formula?
So that might be a question for the bill sponsor, but if you have an answer that you think you want to share, Katie, feel free.
Say it was a policy question.
It's a policy question, okay?
Um,
It's up to y'all.
I'm sorry.
I don't have
Representative
any opposition to that, if that's the route that you want to go. I mean, arsenic is arsenic. I don't want anything that I'm given Salem, period. So it's up to y'all.
Does this follow Virginia's?
have to double
Virginia
check.
did not include, I know Virginia doesn't, it didn't include infant formula and it was, but I spoke with the bill sponsor. Delegate Donato about it and she wasn't against it. She was just like, it's up to y'all. If you go for it, go for it. They didn't just because, I don't know, if they didn't have time but she wasn't against it.
Okay.
Production aggregate means a quantity of product that is intended to have uniform composition, character, and quality and is produced according to a master manufacturing order. And then we talk a little bit about the laboratory that's going to be doing the testing. It's referred to as a proficient laboratory. And that means it is accredited under the International Organization for Standardization or the International Electrotechnical Commission, pursuant to certain standards. And those are general requirements for competence of testing in calibration laboratories. It means that it uses analytical method as sensitive as the analytical method described for the US FDA's Elemental Analysis Manual for Food-Related Products. And also the laboratory demonstrates proficiency in quantifying each toxic element to at least 6 micrograms of the toxic element to kilogram of food through an independent proficiency test by achieving a Z-score that is less than or equal to plus or minus 2. QR code, we know what that is. That's the label that would be printed on the package. Representative sample, that's what would be tested. It means a sample that consists of a number of units that are drawn based on rational criteria, including random sampling and intended to ensure that the sample accurately portrays the material being sampled. When we say toxic heavy metal, that's not open-ended. That means arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. URL, I think we all know what that means. And then US FDA is our Food and Drug Administration. So in subsection B, we have language that a person is not permitted to sell, distribute, or offer for sale any baby food product that contains a toxic heavy metal, one of the 4 listed, that exceeds the limits established by the US FDA. And the provisions of this subsection shall not restrict the continued sale of inventory in stock before January 1, 2026. So if there's already been product made and distributed, it's already on shelves January 1, 2026. This is not assuming that it hasn't expired. This is not prohibiting the sale of those particular products. Subsection C gets into the testing and the labeling of products. So in subsection C, a manufacturer of a baby food product shall test a representative sample of each production aggregate of the manufacturer's final baby product for those 4 toxic heavy metals. The testing of the baby food product shall be conducted by a proficient laboratory. That's the term we just went over in the definitions, at least one time a month. And the manufacturer of a baby food may test the final baby food product before packaging individual units for sale or distribution. Upon request of the commissioner, meaning the Commissioner of Health, a manufacturer is to provide the results of the test conducted pursuant to this section. So the Commissioner of Health can request for that information directly from the manufacturer.
Representative Nelson.
Why? I can understand testing it before it's packaged,
Mhm.
but shouldn't there be a random sample done after packaging? You know, if it's packaged in a glass jar that's sterile, I have confidence in it, but if it's packaged in these foil things that maybe aren't manufactured, screw this, how do you know that the heavy metals couldn't be introduced via the
The
package?
packaging, I think that's a policy question. I think you could write that into your bill that you, after packaging has happened, you would like random sampling of products before they go out the door. I think that's up to the committee.
Maybe after they sit on the shelf a month. I'm just trying to wrap my head out.
That's a good, yeah, I think that, so the two things that we flagged here that we might want to come back to that.
Like the BPA, turning
Yeah.
the BPA
Yeah.
theory.
So we just talked about the testing. D, we'll start talking about the labeling. So the manufacturer of the baby food shall make publicly available on its website for the duration of the product shelf life, plus an additional month, for each baby product sold, manufactured or delivered or offered for sale in the state, the name and level of each toxic heavy metal in the final baby food product as determined by the testing that we just talked about in C. The website would have sufficient information, including the product name, universal product code, or lot or batch number to enable consumers to identify the final baby food product. And lastly, the website would include a link to the US FDA's website that provides the most recent FDA guidance and information about the health effects of toxic heavy metals on children. And then subsection E, if the baby food product is tested for a toxic heavy metal, subject to an FDA action level, regulatory limit, or tolerance, and the manufacturer is to display on the baby food product a label stating in a clear, legible, conspicuous manner that more information about toxic element testing on the product is available by scanning that QR code. Also, a QR code or other machine readable code that directs consumers to the manufacturer's website or the baby food product information page, providing the test results for the toxic heavy metal and a URL to the website on the FDA's website that includes the most recent guidance and information about the health effects of toxic heavy metals in children. So there's two ways consumers are getting information. It's going to be posted on the manufacturer's website. And if there's a certain threshold or substance that's found during the testing, there's also going to be the QR code that consumers can access right on the product. Subsection F. If a consumer reasonably believes, based on the information provided on the baby food product, that it's being sold in the state in violation of this section, the consumer can report that product to the Commissioner of Health. And then this subsection G is the standard language that I was referring to earlier, that says that a violation of this would be a violation of the Consumer Protection Act, which would be enforced by the Attorney General's office. So this is language that I'm sure you've seen throughout the BSAs. And it takes effect July 1, 2026.
Right, thank you. Questions about the bill language itself? Implications, yeah, John.
Would all manufacturers of baby food have to follow this? I was just thinking if there were Vermont-based baby foods, if it was at a sort of farmer's market level, they have to do this.
Doesn't have a carve out for the size of the manufacturer. I think the threshold question is where is it being sold and distributed? And if it's in the state, then they would be subject to this.
Yeah, we do have, I think we do have some small scale
I think so.
manufacturers. Yeah. Okay, Representative
Chair
Steele.
Durfee, we have one of the greatest state-of-the-art agency of agriculture, food and markets testing laboratory down in Randolph Center. We were down adjacent to it. Where weights and measures are also just 3 weeks ago. But I mean, they could test parts per trillion of PFAS and those sort of things. There aren't a lot of labs in the country that do so. You could maybe get some testimony
Yeah.
from.
I'll add it to the list here, yeah.
You were thinking the same way I was, Jay. Thank you for articulating my brainwaves.
We were there a couple of weeks ago, so we got to see exactly what it was, so that helps, yeah. All right,
HR maybe.
if there aren't any other questions, thank you, Katie, for coming in. We will, if we move forward with the bill, then we'll be in touch and maybe have you back for some markup,
That's great.
take some more testimony in the meantime.
Okay, very
Thank you
good.
very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, next up, we have. I think we have our own representative.
John.
Spit it out. I grabbed it 3
Sorry.
times and lost it the last one. Right, thank you.
You wrote it down.
Right, so moving forward now to Bill H68. This is a short form bill on our wall and was introduced by Representative Goslin, who we all know, and moved around the corner from her seat. So if you want to give us, there'll be very little for Ledge Council to show up when we have the bill up on the screen. So we can give you a little more time than we normally would, I think, Michelle.
We can fry her.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So when hello, I'm Representative Michelle Boslin from the next seat over, but also representing Wyndham 3 District. The form the bill was introduced in, as you all know, is extraordinarily short, and there wouldn't be much to report on. Although Beth can tell you what there is. But when I put in the bill with very general language, it was with the goal of giving us some time to think more carefully about what would work for us, what would work for Vermont. And as a person who cares about food and cares about kids and cares about health, when you put all those things together, it's kind of this bill. It's what can we do for kids to promote their health? We can try to make sure that the food that they're getting at school every day is as healthy as it can be. So I do actually have some paragraphs of description of why we need a change. And then 2 actually relatively short, specific recommendations for what I would suggest we do to go forward with the bill for this year. And then there would be future steps that a future legislature would need to decide. So I'm going to go ahead and read my prepared remarks. As members of the committee with jurisdiction over food issues, we all know how important the school lunch program is to the well-being of Vermont children and youth. We know there are some schools already doing a great job cooking meals from scratch in Vermont, often with ingredients grown on farms or gardens close to them. And yet other schools face constraints that make it more challenging to transition to cooking from scratch using whole foods. The quality of food available to kids in school cafeterias across Vermont is sometimes excellent and sometimes not. Our farm to school programs are doing great work bringing locally grown Vermont produce into our schools. And I've heard from teachers how much the students enjoy eating vegetables they've grown. We can get kids to like healthy food, but we need to remove or at least reduce the tempting fast and ultra processed foods that are not the best nutritional option and can cause our kids harm. I worked in a Vermont public high school last year and watched many students carrying trays filled with tater tots and chicken nuggets day after day. Rarely did I see a fruit or vegetable, unless you count the tater tots, which are highly processed. Kids can build better eating habits if we provide them with tempting options. I visited the cafeteria in my hometown school in Westminster a couple of years ago and was impressed by the abundance of tasty items, including things like hearty salads. The kids were very eager and ate everything that was put out. So the food that we feed our kids is going to impact how they grow. And what has happened in many cases is that our kids are growing up to be unhealthy in some of the same ways that our generation is becoming unhealthy. And that's with the obesity crisis. So I was looking at the Vermont Department of Health statistics this morning, and they said 60% of Vermonters are either obese or overweight. It's about 50% in each category. And this leads to a lot of chronic diseases. 40,000 new cases of type 2 diabetes every year in Vermont, 42,000 cases of cardiovascular disease developing in Vermont each year. And these are diseases that are very much correlated with and exacerbated by carrying too much body weight. Well, if you look at kids, about 1 in 4 Vermont children, 12 to 19, is either overweight or obese. And even among very young children, ages 2 to 5 years old, about 13% are obese. So our kids are starting out on a dangerous track that is likely to lead to a not very good place. At least a number of them are. There are several factors contributing to the excess weight issues and chronic disease in Vermont's children. Increased consumption of empty calorie, lower nutrient dense food, and reduced physical activity all contribute to the rising obesity rates in Vermont's children. With many children in Vermont consuming 1 to 2 meals a day at schools, we have an opportunity to have an impact, a positive impact on the health of our children here in Vermont. California was the first state to make a law setting a timeline for the elimination of ultra-processed foods with their Real Food Healthy Kids Act that passed last year. But 30 other states are considering it right now too. We all want the best for our kids, and that means real food, not chemicals and processed foods. The intention of H868 is to help Vermont move towards the elimination of ultra-processed foods in Vermont school lunches and move towards a day where lunches will be made almost entirely from whole foods. I should say lunches and other meals. We don't want to get stuck the way the milk bill was. So we'll make sure that anytime food is mentioned as a meal, it should say meal, not just lunches. We'll move towards a day where meals will be made almost entirely from whole foods and with minimally processed, without high sugar, high fat, or high salt. Transitioning Vermont school lunches will be more challenging for some schools than for others. This will not be a quick process, nor an easy one, but I believe we all agree that serving kids wholesome real food instead of highly processed, less nutritious offerings is a goal worth pursuing for Vermont's kids. California's law to eliminate ultra-processed foods focused on a list of chemicals and when those chemicals would no longer be served in the school lunch program. West Virginia passed a bill which eliminated some dyes and preservatives. My vision for our bill is that it's not going to look like that, at least not the version that we're going to move forward this session. This is partly because we don't have time to learn about all the chemicals that go into packaged food and which are critical and which aren't. But it's more important because we want the process of helping move Vermont schools towards healthier offerings to be decided on by a broader variety of stakeholders that would include nutrition directors who'd be making the changes within the schools and other stakeholders. So the changes should be determined by a bigger team that includes more people than us who have more experience with the day-to-day experience of providing school meals. So now I'm going to tell you what do I envision for the bill this year. I told you what I don't envision for it. I'll tell you what I do envision for it. First of all, I would like to see H 868 establish a Vermont School Meals Task Force. It would include school nutrition directors, teachers, legislators, parents, and advocates involved in food policy. The group would address questions like, what are the challenges facing schools that use more ultra-processed foods? What are the strategies that schools utilizing the most local produce have embraced to make from-scratch cooking workable? What foods or chemicals do we want to absolutely phase out? Are there other factors, such as the school schedule and how long students are available to eat breakfast and lunch, that we need to factor in when making plans? I spoke with the school nutrition director yesterday, and he told me if we passed the bill and started a Vermont School Meals Task Force after the session adjourned in May, he thought we could convene the task force and come up with guidelines to submit to the House and Senate Agriculture Committees and the Department of Education by December 15th of this year. These recommendations should consider the full days at school and how food is available to students. How the food available to students can be as healthy as possible, with ultra-processed foods being minimized or phased out, perhaps over a 5 to 6 year period, as California did. The recommendations of the task force would be sent to the members of the committee, as well as to the Senate Agriculture Committee, most likely, and the future of the elimination of ultra-processed foods would be in the hands of the next legislature. So the second part that I would want included in the bill this year is just to establish a timeline. What is the goal that we're going to tell the task force to work towards? Are we looking at 5 to 6 years? Are we looking at 3 years? Are we looking at 10 years? You know, what's realistic? What's ambitious enough to be helpful for our kids, but also not cumbersome and unrealistic in terms of making changes in the kitchens where that would be needed. So those are my ideas. My vision for the bill is to have 868 set up a task force to develop guidelines to help improve the delivery of meals without harmful chemicals and additives and with more whole foods, and to give the task force a timeline of when we want these transitions to be accomplished by. I look forward to working on these important goals to help Vermont kids with our committee.
Thanks, Sean. I'm really glad now that we had Rosie Kruger in this morning, even though it was kind of flipped, that we were able to hear her thoughts on it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Richard.
So earlier, you know, when I talked about the hot dog, there's nothing wrong with a hot dog once in a while.
Right.
Don't live on hot dog.
Yep.
You mentioned tater tots. So there's a condition in potato called hollow heart.
Mm-hmm.
And this year there was quite a few hollow heart potatoes, and what it is potatoes are growing in a drought condition.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they get some water.
Yeah.
And they grow rapidly.
Yeah.
But the outside grows, the inside doesn't, so
Yeah.
it creates that hollow heart.
Yeah.
A hollow hearted potato is not marketable in a store.
Yeah.
Those all go to the hot dog of the potato world, which are tater tots. And I'm not completely sure how they make, I know they wash them and they chop up the whole potato, skins and all. Which skin can be the best part of the potato. I don't know what kind of hydrogenated oil they put with it, and that's the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bad stuff. It's not the potato. But anyway, it's worth looking into, and as we heard earlier from the ed department, you know, maybe it's picking out certain chemicals we don't want in there.
Yeah, I mean, and there's all different ways that you can define. I mean, like, I decided not to put a strict definition of ultra processed foods into the bill because in a way it doesn't really matter. What matters to me is that we're trying to move Vermont and Vermont food for kids to a healthier place that includes more whole foods. It's less chemicals and more whole foods. But there are some chemicals in our food, and some of those maybe are acceptable and some of those aren't. But I think instead of us determining that, working with the nutrition directors to determine what are the critical ones and what could be better, I think that would be helpful. I mean, when we had the nutrition director visiting here a couple weeks ago, he said he thought this bill would be a good idea because it would nudge them to do better. Well, let's nudge them. If they want to be nudged, let's nudge them.
Representative Burke.
Well, just again, along those same lines, we figure out a system where those potatoes would go to schools at a discount rate. And they can make their own French fries with them, or mashed potatoes.
That's what I do. I
Yeah.
use EVO and I bake them in the oven. Or I use Cabot and I fry them in a pan.
I think that difficult, and obviously Rosie could speak to that more, but these contracts are so rigid in a lot of ways, and these companies, they don't want to have to think about, oh, there's discounted potatoes, let's offer that to the schools, they don't. Performance Food Group doesn't, I'm down, I'd love to see that kind of stuff happen.
I was talking to Rosie in the hallway after she presented to our group this morning, and one of the things she said in terms of a way that the school districts that are more economically challenged, one of the ways that they have found to be able to use the local food incentive is through having, when their contracts come due, if they have a management company, they write into the contract, you need to use this percentage for in terms of the local buying, and they do it. So like the Springfield School District is not a wealthy school district, and they had 25% local buying, and they put that into their contract the last time that they signed on. So there are ways that can happen, but people need to be thinking about it proactively. And then there also has to be a will, because it is going to be more work to make more stuff from scratch than to have things packaged. But I think that with a bunch of smart people sitting together with good intentions, we can come up with something good. And I don't think it has to be entirely exclusionary. I think we could really make our own bill and see what works for Vermont.
Jen?
Yeah, I have a question, and then I'll start with a comment that I would recommend that when this committee takes action, that kind of Boston be the legislative representative on this task force.
Yeah.
But now I'll go to my question. In the last few years, we've heard where we get these commodity foods that come to not just the food shelf, but schools. And then we heard this morning how, $2.29 for a lunch, what will the impact of this bill have on cost per meal? Do you have any sense, will it be similar or will it raise it?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say exactly. I mean, I think the way Rosie was describing it, the amount of money that's going into our lunches is very small.
Right.
And so if you're going to improve the quality of the food, you're probably going to need to spend a little bit more money. That said, it doesn't have to be that. I don't believe that, at least in all cases, that it has to be that. I mean, if you think about something like a potato, if you buy a potato and bake a potato, you can eat it. It's a whole food. It's a good food. Maybe you add a little bit of butter in it, not the healthiest, but a little bit, fine. But you know what? You take that same potato, if somebody made French fries or tater tots or shoestring potatoes or potato chips, you're processing it more and more and more. And actually, it's going to be more expensive to buy a bag of potato chips than to buy a single potato.
Absolutely.
And so I think there are ways, depending on, it might have to involve changing some of the ways that people cook in the kitchen to, in order to make it work. But I think there are a lot of schools that have been transitioning to making more and more things from scratch. And I actually don't know how much of a cost differential that is. So I can't answer your question exactly, except to say, like in my house, I cook almost everything from scratch. And I actually think I save money doing that compared to buying foods that are ready-made, the kind of food that I would like to eat. So it feels like there should be some way to do that on an institutional scale. But it's going to take a lot of minds thinking together to figure it out. So I don't have a simple answer for you today.
Well, I'm not saying the cost.
But my guess is there could be,
Savings
there
is
could be
more
an,
important
there
than
could be an
quality.
increase, but we also might be able to make some notable improvements without it being substantially more expensive. Like we could rule things out without it necessarily becoming more expensive. It would just involve some variations.
Representative Bartholomew?
I see an important aspect of this bill that I don't think we mentioned, and that is education, which I think our schools are still supposed to do that. And basically, when you're going through school, you're learning a lot about judgment and decision making, and these are the kinds of things that stick with you for the rest of your life. And that whole thing can be carried over to food and learning developing appetites, learning what's food, what isn't food. So I think that's a really important aspect of this, in addition to the other things you mentioned.
That there be some curriculum developed around nutrition for
Just
kids.
the fact that the exposure and at the earliest ages to readjust what people view as good food and what they want to eat. And that can change their behavior for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Actually.
Well, and I absolutely believe that if kids are exposed to more healthy food, they will adopt those foods and see those as normal because it's whatever they're used to. I mean, my first job out of college, I was working at a school for Lakota kids in South Dakota. And I was a vegetarian and most of them weren't, but I made quiche one day. Well, I can tell you none of them had ever had quiche, and they looked at it and they said, "What is this?" And I said, "Well, it's got eggs and broccoli and cheese." And one of them right away says, "Egg pie, gross." And then they were all gross, gross. Nobody wanted to eat the egg pie. So my husband and I ate the egg pie, and a couple other kids tasted it, but not very impressed. You know what? I made it 2 more times, and then they started asking for it. I would tell them they had to take a bite. And once they got used to it, they were like, "Oh, this is good." So kids can get used to stuff. They can, their palates can be educated to make better choices.
I think we should, thank you, Michelle, and we'll keep the ideas percolating here, but why don't we ask Ledge Council to come up and show us the bill? Is it that?
Yep.
Okay.
Was it 3
Yeah.
It's not in the invite, but yeah, it's probably the email.
It's okay too.
Email for these spots, thank you.
In egg pie.
Sit next to you. I mean, it's such a complicated bill.
I might have it memorized already.
St. James Office of Legislative Counsel, and
Bradley Showman, Office of Legislative Counsel.
so I'm your education policy attorney. And with some of you a few years ago, we did the Universal School Meals Bill, which is why I'm here. But I don't know anything about ultra processed foods. That's why Bradley is here. So should you choose to take up this bill, this is probably something that we'll do together, depending on where you go and what you do with it. Let's see.
It's for anyone who's following along, it's 868 and it is on our committee page.
So as your chair just mentioned, this is H868 as introduced. It is a short form bill. So all it has is a statement of purpose that reads, this bill proposes to establish guidelines to phase out the use of ultra processed foods and increase cooking from scratch using more whole fresh foods in Vermont's school food programs. And the bill is entitled An Act Relating to Prohibiting the Use of Ultra Processed Foods in School Food Programs. And for those of you who worked on universal meals, and it sounds like you had Rosie in earlier, so maybe you've already covered this. School food programs is a defined term in Vermont law. So we're referring to the federal meals programs, the school lunch and breakfast programs. And that is it.
Representative O'Brien.
Just quickly, Beth, does that include this sort of smart snacks universe we were hearing about from Rosie? Like,
Oh, I don't know anything about that.
yeah.
But it's not, there's nothing in the Title 16 Universal Meals Program that mentions smart snacks. So,
Or vending-
I don't know.
Vending machine food.
I don't think the school, well, let's look at it. I don't think so. So the definition of school foods is the provision of food to persons under programs meeting standards for assistance under the National School Lunch Act and the Child Nutrition Act, which is the breakfast piece. So if the food you're talking about is covered under those programs, then yes. But if it's not swept in through those programs, then I would say there's nothing in Title 16 in our universal meals programs that talks about those foods.
Some schools or some of the legislation that I've looked at has included limiting snacks and snack sales and vending machine sales, but it doesn't have to. Like that we can decide if we want to include that or not.
Have you considered reaching out to Secretary Bobby Kennedy and the Baja Movement, Make America Healthy Again? And because he would probably endorse this, just saying that you could be the bridge between the left and the right to come together, Michelle?
I have to say, I haven't thought of that, Richard, but now that you've mentioned it, I'll ponder it a little bit.
And being a little bit facetious with that, but this is, how can you not support this and baby food?
So Beth, thank you I know you came in a half hour ago and I hope you were able to do some work while you were sitting on the sidelines there. But appreciate all the work that you put into drafting this bill.
Oh,
Thank you.
All those hours. Yeah, thank you. Anything else from us?
The only thing I was going to add, but it sounds like with Representative Boslin's overview, I think that the goals of the bill takes care of this, but ultra processed food is not defined in state law. And in federal law, the FDA is examining a definition of ultra processed food. So they're taking comment on how to define that as part of the federal administration's health initiatives to define what an ultra processed food is. But it sounds like the goals of this bill is less so defining an ultra processed food, certainly not defining ultra processed food for agriculture as a whole, more of defining what is good food, whole foods for kids to eat in schools and to examine what that means for our school system. So just to kind of get that context of the narrow kind of goals of this bill as to not create like a definition of ultra processed food that would affect all of agriculture or something of the sort.
John.
Yeah, just what was the sort of intended universe of school? Because is that definition in there too? Because it could be pre-K, or PCCs up through UVM.
It's the public schools. I mean, currently, I believe it goes from daycare centers through high school.
So there's two, and this is really where Rosie's expertise comes in. There's two. There's the federal food programs that operate, food programs as defined in our state law refer to programs that are run under the National School Lunch Program and the National or the Child Nutrition Act. The way our Universal Meals Program operates is that if you are a public school, an approved independent school, or there are some pre-K programs that qualify, if you are running one of those federal meals programs, then you can participate in the Universal Meals Program. There may be other childcare programs or adult care programs or after-school programs that are also participating in federal programs related to food that aren't covered under the National School Lunch Act or the Child Nutrition Act. So that is one piece that you can have if you vote to take this bill up and if you choose to advance it. And if it does end up being a task force, that is something that you could ask the task force to make recommendations to you all. And are there any other food programs that are either federally supported or state supported that you want to include whatever guidance to? But our Universal Meals Program does cover some independent schools, all the public schools are required to participate. Independent schools can opt in. And then there are some pre-K programs that are operated in childcare centers that can also opt in. It's not straightforward.
If we vote to take this bill up, or in this case, Beth, should I come to you or Bradley for
I think if you are doing, if your goal is to do a task force, I think either of us can handle that. And so maybe both of us, and then we can
okay.
amongst ourselves
Figure it out then.
discuss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who has-
Yeah. But yes, I think we'll probably both be involved no matter what.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, any questions for either or any of our witnesses here? All right, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Bradley, you are back and we're done, Patricia, for this segment.